Michael, what is the purpose of cinema?
Well, looking at the history of cinema, or specifically the history of just screen in general, I think what it has essentially just come from is firstly started out as sort of like an illusion. You get the back in the old days where it was part of the circus time when people would go into a tent and they would see what was the train that shot what's it called again? I forgot what it was, but that one where it just trains coming through and then people thought it was actually going to come through and run them over and all that, so it was used as an illusion. But then what it was then pretty much transformed into this narrative form of storytelling. It's telling narrative, and then you get the Great Train Robbery, the story of the Kelly Gang and all that, where it's able to communicate a story visually, and then from that it's springboarded into this big business that we see going on in Hollywood. And so I think that it has certainly evolved over time in terms of what is the purpose of cinema, what it's utilized for. But I think generally just the all encapsulating idea is to essentially just reach out and take us through, I guess, sort of like a simulation of emotion. And whether that's to make you laugh or to put you into the mind of the character or to make you think about something or make you even or just generally feel something. I think that it's used as I would say an emotional simulation in order to experience these things that we pretty much may or may not experience in life. But also at the same time, I think there are certain films that validate certain emotions, I think, to say oh no, this is right, or to how should I put this, just to make you sort of if you had any doubts about certain things, just sort of okay, to gain some perspective, to think about oh no, this is how this person sees the world. So I think that that's at the very least what I think it is. To be very curious to see what you react to most, especially in terms of cinema and all that.
It's funny you mention that because I feel like everyone has their own unique tastes to different types of stories and different types of filmmaking styles as well. But that's one of the big things I feel like is most interesting about the cinema experience is that when you're going into a dark room and you're experiencing the same story as everyone else in that dark room, and you're almost having a collective spiritual experience. I like that way of explaining it. It is really you all kind of go on this journey together, and as a result, you experience the story, and it affects you in an emotional way that is sometimes really profound. And I feel like that's one of the great things of cinema is when you can go into a dark room with a good sound system and a big screen and experience it with a crowd. Just having that profound, movie-going experience, I think is really, really cool.
Oh my God, you just gave me goosebumps right there. But no, I definitely agree. And that's always been like that. It's always been going to the cinema collectively. From the beginning, once I said about it being an illusion and people paying money to go and see something up on the big screen that is not literally in front of them. It's always been like that. It's always been just collectively with a group of people going in a dark room, cut off from the rest of the world, and being able to see something that they wouldn't normally see in day-to-day life.
Well, the evolution of cinema and the motion picture has affected the whole sort of way we understand the world so drastically. Because obviously, the first cinema going experience I think was in 1895, I think in France or somewhere.
Yeah.
And then from that first experience, and then we eventually got to the phase of color and then sound as well. The evolution of just that one motion. Obviously, we used to have silent films back in the day. So just seeing the evolution of using pure visual stimulus to entertain a crowd, and then once you bring sound into it as well, and then obviously as technology has evolved, we bring visual effects on board, and then even better sound design and all that type of stuff.
3D.
Well, 3D as well. That was definitely a phase, but that was still even very cool for the time.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And certain films definitely made use of it in very cool and dramatic ways. But it's just fantastic to see how technology has evolved over the last century or so.
Well, I think that's also something that I'd be very curious to hear your opinion on is when we're talking about like innovation for cinema, and yes, I joke about 3D and all that, but also at the same time, I'm all for just any type of way that you can improve upon the cinema experience. And I remember seeing a movie, it was called Searching, with John Cho.
Yes, I just watched that recently. Yeah, that's a really fun movie.
It's really good, and it made me think because it wasn't really innovative because like telling a movie like on a computer, had been done before with Unfriended. I think there was a couple of other ones as well. But at the same time, how can you create an intriguing narrative by doing something like that without it coming across as a gimmick?
Well, you have like a narrative constraint where you can only tell a story through a very specific storytelling device.
Exactly.
And that's where I think it really challenges a filmmaker to really try different ways and being creative in different ways in order to try and make it work. And like you said, not be a gimmick that people like, oh, it's like one of those movies.
Yeah, exactly. And I think especially with how the world, the state of the world and what it's become in the past year, people have become a bit more savvy. And there was that one movie, I think it was sold to Shudder, which was Host. Did you hear about that?
I did not hear about that specific situation, but there's plenty of those examples, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's where they were able to pretty much just sort of like utilize that technology to create these very interesting, I wouldn't say innovative, but it's not as common a filming technique to just have it be told like on a webcam on a computer and all that. But in terms of searching, it's sort of a weird idea to like go to the cinema and just and then you see a computer screen.
Well, it's actually funny that you say that because I would argue that Searching is a film that is not best seen in a cinema. I would argue that that's probably a movie that would be better suited for a streaming service or a in-home experience because I watched that movie on my laptop.
Yeah,
and I felt like watching it on a laptop actually added to the experience because I was like, I could totally see this happening like based off the layout and obviously the type of environment I was watching it in on my laptop. So that sort of idea of where a movie is seen, I think, is very important, especially to a lot of these studios where their distribution strategies and stuff that they're organizing. Because the way I look at cinema, I think the purpose of cinema, first and foremost, is to entertain people.
Okay.
And I think that's such a huge key element that a lot of studios go out and strive towards, and then they fail miserably. But we also have a lot of good examples of movies that go out, they have a goal of just trying to create a fun, entertaining film, and they succeed. And whilst I think that entertainment is the most important element of the movie-going cinema experience, I also think that another key element of that is the technical proficiency and competence that is shown by the filmmakers in the way they create a product in order to create that entertaining experience.
Yeah, well, I to a certain extent, I do agree with you, but then you look at certain genres like, say, comedy, where you can say, sure, that's not sort of like the most flashy, of genres and stuff like that, but if a movie is able to make you laugh, you can pretty much excuse any other aspect of it. If it can make you laugh, if it's really funny, and that comes down to the actors. And it's not just sort of like, it's not just technical proficiency, it's just proficiency across the board.
Well, exactly. And to jump on from that, when I say technical proficiency, I mean that in all phases of the filmmaking. So with modern day filmmaking, I feel like it's interesting because the post-production phase, excluding visual effects, I feel like is always very proficient with a lot of these big blockbuster Hollywood type films. Sound design, dialogue and just general sound effects and all that. I feel like for most movies is actually quite good. It's only in the lower budget stuff that you can notice it's like, oh, that doesn't sound that good. But for the most part, movies always have really good sound design. The other things that I think is also really important is, like you mentioned, acting. That's obviously a huge thing. But writing, the way you construct characters, so the characterization, how interesting, how engaging, how emotional their story is. Obviously, story is king. Story is always the most important part. And that, again, comes back into the script writing. And then obviously the filmmaking process of, actually how the camera is used, how the lighting is used. I look at examples like Blade Runner 2049 has some of the best cinematography I've ever seen because it makes such great use of lighting, the framing of the characters in order to communicate story. 1917 is also a great example of that, utilizing that trope of the long take in order to create that immersive feeling that really sucks you into the story and makes you feel like you're actually there experiencing it with the soldiers. So those ideas of using that technical aspects all across the board, from pre-production in your development, your script writing, all that type of stuff, to the actual production, in the actual making of the project with the various camera and sound techniques, and then obviously post-production where you have all the sound and cinema mixing, all that type of stuff as well, I think is all very important. Visual effects is a whole different beast though, because I feel like visual effects, you can definitely get great visual effects when you have obviously the budget for it, but also the time for it. And I feel like a lot of movies, I heard this once, movies never get finished, they get released.
Yeah. But also at the same time, also it's not just visual effects that are limited to just stuff that's created by a computer. It's also about in-camera effects and stuff like that.
Or practical effects.
Practical effects as well. Yeah. So you look at, I think the prime example obviously is Chris Nolan, where he just wants to get as much in-camera as possible because it feels more genuine, it feels more real. As opposed to the human eye can detect fakeness pretty well.
Very well.
Yeah, very well. And especially, going back and looking at some old movies, I recently went to the cinema recently and saw the original Tron.
Oh, yeah.
And for its time, because I believe it was one of the first movies to actually put visual effects, computer visual effects.
Wasn't it one of the first movies that also did the facial swapping or de-aging or something?
No, I don't think it was de-aging.
I haven't seen it, but I just remember hearing something about that was one of the first movies that used a certain type of visual effects technology.
Yeah, I don't think it was de-aging, but it certainly maybe like matte paintings or something like that to place it onto somebody else. I'm not too sure either, but I want to go back to what you were talking about in terms of what is paramount.
Yes.
I honestly think that people say story is most important. I've got to say, it really depends on the needs on the type of movie you're going to make.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, this is interesting because this is why I brought you on, because I know you have such great knowledge and understanding of the filmmaking process, and I had a feeling that we might disagree on something. So I think this will be an interesting conversation. So you said that you don't think story is the most important part. I'm interested to hear why.
Story is very important. It is very important when it needs to be. I think there are some films that you can say, this movie is not... What is the most engaging thing about this movie is not the story itself. Look, Godzilla vs. Kong is not an engaging story.
Well, I'm so glad you brought that up, because that was one of the examples I was just going to pinpoint to. Because there are certain movies that are designed specifically for just balls to the wall, crazy, fun action. And I think Godzilla vs. Kong is a great example of that, where it's just, you want to see Kong and you want to see Godzilla just go at it and fight and just have that spectacle and that sort of fun action movie experience. And like you said, the story itself is kind of bare bones and predictable, but you go to see that movie to watch Kong and Godzilla throw down.
Yeah. But also... Yeah, no, I 100% agree with that. But also, you've got to think about, if you don't go to see it for the story, then what story does there need to be, there that's, engaging and stuff like that? I believe that Adam Wingard knew exactly the type of film he was making.
I agree.
And he needed some semblance of a story in order to justify getting these two big titans to fight with each other. And he knew exactly what people would be going to see this movie for. You're not going to go to see Godzilla vs. Kong to see something on the level of Bergman. You're not. But at the same time, I think that in the case of Godzilla vs. Kong, there are other ways I think that movie is proficient. I do think that you see flourishes of Wingard's his style. His style. If you watch his other movies like The Guest, which is a fantastic movie, his use of neon colors with lighting, his camera work, it's very on brand for him, and so it's just like he's not shackled by just like studio notes saying like, oh, you need to do it this very mediocre way. No, he actually is wanting to do something that is visually up his alley, and so I think that for a lot of movies, I think a lot of them are exercises in technical merit. The one movie, so one of the movies that I go to, just for example of this, is Michael Mann's Miami Vice, which is it's not a great story. It's not just, you don't watch that movie for the story. You watch it because it is set in Miami, and you just want to see these cops just I think the DEA. It's the style. You can just put that movie on, and it can serve as just like, I don't know, like screensaver footage because it's so beautiful. The Nicolas Cage movie Mandy. Did you ever see that one?
I haven't, but I've heard it was good. Yeah.
Yes, it's fantastic, and it's not because of the plot. And I joke about this. Going to see Mandy for the plot is like going to see Love Actually for the visual effects. In that, but it is very minimal, and you just want to watch it simply because of the visual flourishes, and Nicolas Cage, who actually gives a heartfelt performance. Well, I wouldn't say heartfelt, but he certainly utilizes his Cage-isms, to fit that character. So I do think that there are some movies that you do watch the movie for the narrative because you want to get sucked in emotionally, but then there are other movies that you just want to watch and just like, oh my god, this is beautiful. And then there are some that like do crossover. An example of that you have just mentioned, Blade Runner 2049. I think that is a wholly narratively satisfying movie that is just gorgeous at the same time, and also I actually think it's better than the first Blade Runner, to be honest. I know that's a controversial opinion.
No, I would agree.
Yeah,
I think it's one of the best movies that's been made in recent times. Yeah.
Yeah, I know, and I can acknowledge certain flaws it may have. Is it a bit too long? Sure. Is it a bit slow in parts? Sure, but I think it's deliberate. It's deliberately slow, very streamlined.
Yes, I would agree with that, and that's one of the things I find interesting, and that's why art is subjective, right? That I would agree those moments that you've just criticized are, yes, deliberate, and I would agree that they have purpose behind them because it's trying to create this slow detective story. But at the same time, when you get to that final moments and you have that such fulfilling, satisfying narrative ending, I think that it makes up for those little moments. But again, that's just my opinion. Some people might disagree.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of people disagree. Obviously, like in terms of like look at the box office of it, it was not a hit. It was not a hit, but also at the same time, you're making a sequel to a cult film. There's a reason why it's a cult film.
But see, that's one of those things, even though it wasn't financially successful, and that's ultimately all what the studio cares about, I still think that movie will have a legacy going into the future that will be very profound, because I think Denis Villeneuve directed the hell out of that movie. Roger Deakins deserved the Oscar. Yeah. Like, that movie will go down in history as one of the best artistic expressions of this century. Yeah,
no, I definitely agree with that. And I do think that it will also be, another filmmaker that I think is fantastic is Denis Villeneuve. Even if at times I think that his films aren't for everybody, but for the people that they are for, they are very much all hail to Denis, as a filmmaker.
Well, to jump on from that, I think Christopher Nolan is in a similar category.
Yes.
Of some people have issues with Christopher Nolan. I've never really understood those criticisms.
I understand them. I mean, he's my favorite living director, but I understand those criticisms.
Well, there are certain things that I also critique him on, but I think he is undoubtedly probably the best working director in the industry currently. Obviously, there's so many great directors working at the moment, but I think Christopher Nolan, what he does is so unique and so distinctly him. And I think he's created some of the best movies that's ever been made. But one of the things I wanted to mention, based on what you said earlier, is that going to the movies, and sometimes you don't go necessarily for the story. A lot of people do go and watch a movie, whether it's at home or on the big screen, for that sense of escapism.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of movies do provide that. We mentioned Kong vs. Godzilla. I feel like the Fast and Furious franchise may be like that as well. But what I want to kind of push back on you with is that sort of sense of story not always being most important. Why I think it is still most important is because you can still have that sort of sense of escapism and have these silly and quirky concepts. But when you tell a really good story that kind of combines both elements, I think that's when you have a fantastic movie-going experience. My example, the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Okay.
When you're taking those Marvel characters and that mythology, when you look at it, especially when you go back through some of the comics and just look at some of the outfits that these characters wear, it's so silly, so ridiculous, but somehow, you know, Kevin Feige and the creators at Marvel have found a way to make them contemporary, make them emotional, and actually find a way to make these characters relevant for today in a way that makes people really engage both in the narrative and in the characters, because they do such a great job of showcasing these characters and making them really compelling for us to watch. And I use the MCU as that example of that combination of taking themselves seriously and creating a good story whilst also focusing on character, whilst also dealing with all these crazy concepts like wizards and aliens and obviously superpowered individuals. So when I look at like examples like Kong and Godzilla and the Fast and Furious franchise and stuff like that, I say, yeah, they're fun. They're just movies that you go to watch to turn your brain off. And I understand that those movies have a role in the movie-going industry. However, I think in order to raise the bar and create a movie-going experience that people will remember, and that is long-lasting, I think you need to take a page out of what Marvel has done and create a story that is really engaging and really compelling, whilst also focusing on character and still fleshing out all those silly aspects in it as well.
Yeah, well, I think that the reason for the MCU's success is because I look at it as it's essentially television, because they've created, 21, 22 films that have essentially...
A lot of
movies that have springboarded onto the next one. And I think that going forward with the MCU, and it's going to be really interesting because they're now on television, is it really the Marvel Cinematic Universe?
It's a great question, yeah.
I think that it's actually going to thrive on TV because also at the same time, we are living in a golden age of television, especially, you know, segueing a little bit into streaming. With the Marvel Cinematic Universe now coming onto television, you now have the hours to delve into these characters and to have these storylines, continue and to allow these fan favorite characters to have the spotlight and all this stuff. And I think that's what it's going to thrive in from what essentially the MCU essentially was. Like I said, it was television because you're continuing, this
that interconnected story.
Yeah, that interconnected story of these characters where you don't really see an end in sight, because the MCU, each individual film, it sets up the next one. We can all, we pretty much all say that's why, post-credit scenes exist. They intend on continuing it. And at this part, there is no sort of, end date for the MCU right now. If you look at the James Bond films, each film is designed essentially to begin and end within the one film. It's not necessarily begging for a sequel, but that's why I gravitate towards more sort of like, if we want to talk about like long form franchises that have existed over the years, that's why I kind of gravitate towards James Bond, because those films essentially have created this formula that you can just place into a film and from beginning, middle, end, adhere to that and not have to worry about like, what's going to come down 4 or 5 years, later on. The MCU and I guess also at the same time, the MCU has thrived on that. And I think the success, and you kind of already see that with the other show, The Mandalorian. People love that show. Why are people engaging with The Mandalorian more than they are with the Star Wars sequels? It's because you get more time with them. And I think that going forward, that's what's going to be thriving for the MCU, even though it's probably going to be, it's not really the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
No, it's a good point.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things, and you mentioned streaming services. I feel like we live in uncharted territory right now. We're going through the world, and the industry is changing so quickly and so rapidly. Streaming services are a recent phenomenon, only in the last decade, really. And yet it has changed the industry. Some would argue for the better, some would argue for the worse, in dramatic fashion. there's so many examples now of movies that were designed for the big screen theatrical release window, but are now going either straight to streaming services or they're having hybrid releases. I know HBO Max is doing a thing where they're releasing movies on HBO Max and in theaters at the same time. Disney Plus has now just announced that Black Widow will be released in theaters and on Disney Plus for the additional fee at the same time.
Which I think maybe I'm not sure about this, but I suspect there's a possibility that they may roll back on that, especially with how Godzilla vs. Kong is doing right now, because I think it's actually nearly grossed over $400 million.
Yeah, it's done really well.
It's done really well, and it's the first big example of people actually wanting to go back to the cinema to see something.
Yes.
So I think that kind of going into this point, and which I think you might have been leading there to. Do people still want to go to the cinema?
Well, exactly right. See, and that's what I found most interesting, and you kind of hit the nail on the head there, is that people want to go back to the cinema. And I think that's really where this question comes down, is like, what is the future of the cinema going experience? Because a lot of people tend to say like, cinema's going to go away, they're past their time, streaming services are the future. But I completely disagree, because I think that the cinema going experience is so unique, and it creates a certain type of feeling that people definitely want to go out and watch. Like, people have said for the last couple of years that, movies are not going to be as successful on the big screen anymore because streaming services have come through and taken them out. But you look at recent examples, Avengers End Game is the highest grossing movie.
Not anymore.
Well,
not
Avatar,
anymore.
yes.
Not anymore.
But from its release to recently, it was the highest grossing film of all time.
Yeah.
And that was done through the cinema experience.
Yeah.
So this idea of like people don't go to the cinema anymore, I don't think is true, because there's so many examples. Godzilla vs. Kong, a recent example coming after a pandemic where people, are in certain countries and stuff don't have easy access to theaters and stuff. Still this movie has been quite financially successful given the circumstances. And I think that is evidence to the cinema going experience still having a future, but the question is, in what capacity and what is that future? Will it be as successful as what it used to be, or will it be not as successful, or how will it change? I'm interested to hear your opinions on that.
Yeah, well, I think that in terms of streaming, I think with the introduction of it within the past 10 years and this question of like, what is the future of screen content going to be? I think that what we're living in right now is really testing. In a way, it was almost inevitable for us to finally be forced into a corner and to ask ourselves, okay, so what is the bigger draw in for screen content, whether it's cinema or for streaming? And I like to think, and this is kind of like what I'm seeing right now, I think that what Warner Brothers did with HBO Max is a very interesting experiment, even though it has received some backlash. I think that what they're seeing right now is they are looking at the numbers of streaming, and they're looking at the numbers of the box office. And in the case of Godzilla vs. Kong, it really does depend on what the audience, what format people want to see that movie in. But then you look at, say, another small movie, The Little Things with Denzel Washington, Jared Leto, and Rami Malek. That was released. That was given, both streaming and a cinema release, and I don't think it did well. But I think it also explained that it also showed this is not the type of movie that people really want to go to see at the cinema. I'm not sure how it did in terms of streaming numbers, but I would. And that's why but also at the same time you look at some streaming services that only release numbers when it's just sort of it's actually groundbreaking, or it's just hits a milestone. So I kind of criticize streaming services for that, only being very playing the cards close to the chest in terms of what they want to release with data and analytics. But I do think going forward, they will definitely, and we're already kind of seeing it right now, wanting to see only putting stuff out that is, like you said, designed for the cinema, and then putting the smaller scale stuff onto streaming services. However, there have been some examples that I would say kind of push back against that. I actually was very fortunate to see Alfonso Cuarón's Roma at the cinema, and I would argue that movie that's as cinematic of a movie as anything else that was being released at the time. So the fact that only some people majority of people only got to see that movie on a streaming service, does that utilize, was that the right play? But also you have to beg at the same time, if you look at that movie, on like at face value, it's a black and white movie set in Mexico with no known actors, and you're putting that on a streaming service. It's going to garner Oscars and all that, but also it's not going. But if you put it at the cinema, it's not going to draw in an audience, unfortunately.
Well, that's where I'll jump in. I think that's when you ask that question of what is the future of the cinema going experience. I think that's where the key distinction will be made.
Yeah.
Is this a movie that people will want to see on the big screen versus would people prefer to see this in the comfort of their home on the small screen?
I don't think it's actually going to come down to audience. I think it's just going to come down to
just basic numbers and analytics and stuff like that.
No. I think it's going to come down to the I think what the director intends, what the studio wants.
It's funny you say it. I don't think that'll be the case because a lot of movies, because I think, and this is my opinion, I think all movies are best seen on the big screen in that cinema environment, right? But unfortunately, I don't think directors and a lot of key filmmakers will be allowed that opportunity to get their movies on the big screen because a lot of studios and producers just may not see the worth in it. So I agree that, yes, a lot of people would love to see their movies on the big screen, but when it comes, at the end of the day, they might not get that opportunity because it might not be financially viable.
Okay, well, look at Zack Snyder's Justice League.
Well, yes, that's another good example.
Yeah. With that in the case, I bet your bottom dollar that would not have been, they would not have thrown money at that if it weren't for the pandemic. And
also for HBO Max.
And HBO Max, because the reason behind that is who is going to want to see a movie re-release? Not just a 4-hour movie, but a movie that didn't do so well at the box office, was critically mixed to negative. I personally liked it, but it was got mixed reviews. Who would want to see that again? Obviously, there were people who were, rallying behind that, who essentially hashtagged it into existence.
Exactly, yeah.
But I think that being able to, with HBO Max existing, it really sort of like gave way to it, pretty much come into existence. I'm not sure if it was Warner Brothers who threw money at it, or if it was.
I think it was mainly HBO.
Yeah, I think it was mainly HBO because they needed, to have a viable product.
Yeah.
And so they were able to do that and make that a thing, and that was due to audience demand.
Well, it also adds to that fact of because that is a movie with an extremely long runtime. It's designed in a way almost to be viewed in your home on the small screen because, and I'm glad you brought up Zack Snyder's Justice League because I used that and also Martin Scorsese's The Irishman as two examples of really long movies that are great and they both have a purpose behind them, but you can't really see them getting through into the theater experience based off their runtimes. I think The Irishman was 3.5 hours. People can't sit still for that long. So when you break it down and watch it in small chunks, I personally watched it in 3.5 hours in one sitting because I'm just a maniac. But I know some people didn't.
Actually, you want to hear something a bit more insane? I saw The Irishman at the cinema twice.
Oh, really?
Yes, I did. Yes, and
clearly you love the movie then. Right?
I think I would say it was the first Scorsese movie I watched for the first time and actually loved just upright. There are some there are some Scorsese movies where I've grown to love over time, but this was the first one which is sort of like, I'm loving this.
Wow.
And I think that, when you look at The Irishman, I do not think that was there is a reason why The Irishman could not find a movie studio to get it financed. Because if you look at it, it's a couple of actors who are essentially, I don't want to say they're past their prime because we don't know about that yet, but they are coming to the end of their career.
I would agree.
The last time we saw Robert De Niro and Al Pacino in the same movie, nobody even heard of it, and I'm pretty sure you've never heard of it. I think it was a movie called Righteous Kill.
No.
That was released in 2008. And I remember, the whole hoopla of with Heat, Robert De Niro, Al Pacino in the same scene together. There was the whole driving force behind, the excitement for that movie directed by Michael Mann. But also at the same time, Martin Scorsese is going to make the movie that he wants to make. Mm-hmm. And you can in the case of Martin Scorsese, either you're on his wavelength or he's not going to be partners with you. And that's not, it's not sort of like, clashing or anything. That is just business. That is the way that it's done. And so when he gets to somewhere like Netflix, I suspect the only reason why he took Netflix is because they were actually willing to finance it. I think that he's rather bitter.
I think you bang on the money.
I think he was bitter about that movie being put onto a streaming service. That's mainly where people are going to see it. But no other.
Well, he's been pretty outspoken that he's not a big fan of the streaming services.
No, I'm not sure. I don't know about streaming.
Well, I know Steven Spielberg has definitely been outspoken.
Spielberg has definitely, even though...
Actually, I think where I'm coming through, I think Martin Scorsese was definitely outspoken against streaming services before The Irishman. Maybe since then he's maybe changed his tune.
Yeah, because his new movie, Killers of the Flower Moon, is actually going to be going to Apple.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and that's going to have Robert De Niro, Leonardo DiCaprio in it. And so, once again, I think that if you look at some filmmakers going forward, I just don't understand. Like, with Netflix, did you see recently that Netflix had bought the next 2 sequels to Knives Out?
I did, yes.
Yeah, like, how... And do you know how much they bought it for?
Like $450 million.
Yes. How?
Well,
what money do you have lying around? Because I'm not sure if Netflix is like still in debt. It's still
they're
in debt
not.
Or not.
So only recently do they turn into profit land. So
okay.
For the longest time, you're right. Netflix was in debt massively. Like they were in the hole big time. Yeah. But they were still able to stay afloat because they had enough money coming in from their subscribers, and investors could see the longevity of the product.
Yeah.
Especially Netflix, because they're spearheading this whole rise of the streaming services. But yes, only in the last, I think, beginning of this year they turned into profit land. So now they probably have a bit more money to flex around. I know that this year, especially, they've like really flushed out a lot of big movies that are coming out. I think like each month or something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Knives Out thing, that's interesting because those were movies that I would have preferred to see on a big screen because I really enjoyed the first Knives Out.
Yeah,
but again, I can understand it's a murder mystery. That genre isn't super, it's not super popular anymore. Rian Johnson kind of made the resurgence with it. So I don't know. Maybe that's a movie that people would prefer to see on the small screen. Me as someone who really enjoys the cinema experience, maybe that's just me being selfish, but I don't know, maybe the majority is in favor of that kind of move. I don't know. What do you think?
In the case of Knives Out, I do understand why it would be picked up by a streaming service because, I mean...
Because
go back. Sorry.
That's all right.
I mean, what I'm wanting to say is that, like, you're saying, like, the murder mystery genre isn't that popular. Well, there are a couple of murder mysteries we get every so often. We had Kenneth Branagh's Murder on the Orient Express.
Yep.
He's got another one coming up, Death of the Nile. But I think that Rian Johnson just looked at the landscape and he just said that, like, look, they are offering me to do 2 more sequels to this for this amount, and compared to what the studios are willing to throw at me, they're willing to roll the dice on me. I might as well give it to Netflix. But also, at the same time, I remember seeing Knives Out. I remember, spoilers, when the Christopher Plummer character, when it's revealed, oh no, he was the one who essentially killed himself. Sorry for a 2-year-old movie about that. And I remember there were these guys who were sitting behind me, literally said something along the lines of like, so yeah, well, I can just leave now because we know what happened. What's the rest of the movie going to be like? If we know who essentially killed him. I kind of love moments like that, little moments where just like it's not heckling the movie, but it's just sort of like, yeah, like why else am I going to watch this movie now if the thing that I've come to see is now been answered to me within the first 30 minutes? So
Well, Rian Johnson did a good job of kind of revolutionizing the genre. And so I didn't mean to intercut you before, right. But what I was just going to quickly add was that first movie was still quite financially successful. So I never understood that idea of like, the first one was successful, so why would he have that thought process? But then as you were explaining, I think you're probably right. Rian Johnson was probably looking at the landscape and was like, I think this might be my best bet.
But you also look at the budget of the first movie. It wasn't that much. I think it was like up in like 40 or 50 million, I think.
No, you're right. It wasn't that big, but the return on investment was still pretty big.
Yeah, exactly. And you look at the model of Blumhouse, where they're making movies for what, like 5, 10 million? And look at Get Out. It like made like
huge amounts.
Wait, how many times over its budget did it actually make? Like times 20 or times 50 or something like that? Yeah, something like that. Yeah. So I think some of the people, and I also think in terms of like the arguments that people are making about like, studios, taking a bath or like at a financial loss and all that. I think the one thing that it comes down to is they throw so much money at their films, and you look at it and you go, where's the money gone? I remember watching Dark Phoenix, and I was thinking to myself, I think that movie cost $200 million, and I could have swore that...
Let's not go into Dark Phoenix.
I
don't want to get depressed on that movie.
Yeah, look, in the case of Dark Phoenix, I'm not just talking about the story and just stuff like that. I'm just talking about like visually, like what they could have done with that movie. It cost like $200 million, and I was looking at it and going like, where's the money gone?
Yeah.
It
felt mid to low budget to me.
Yeah, it did. It could have been made for like, I don't know, 70, 80, 100. But it was. Then I looked it up afterwards. I swear, just like, okay, at most it's 150. It was $200 million. It just sort of like,
that's crazy.
That is crazy. I mean, I know it had reshoots and stuff like that, but also, it's just they are throwing. Of course, they're going to be at a loss because they are throwing so much money at these movies that they could have made for $10 million. Look at compare The Invisible Man to The Mummy. The Invisible Man, was made, on a shoestring budget, is very. I think it's just very relevant to today. It's creating. And it's not depending on a cinematic universe. And look at what going forward. They're wanting to make these modern tellings of these classical characters, as opposed to The Mummy, where it was trying to copy the, once again going back to the MCU formula. But then you look at something like, okay, going back to Godzilla versus Kong, it wasn't exactly the first film. Godzilla wasn't really screaming out for a cinematic universe. Warner Brothers looked at it and just went, hey, we can make a cinematic universe out of this. There is enough, demand, for this. And personally, I hope that they cross over with Pacific Rim. They probably won't. But
that would be interesting.
Yeah, that'd be so interesting. Just sort of like they're both legendary picture productions. Like Legendary poured the money into both Pacific Rim and into the Monsterverse. So it's just sort of like, surely that would have been an actual fit, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, I don't know either. But it's funny you mention all these sort of, the budget is obviously a huge part of a movie going, production. But what I think is most interesting is how much money is obviously getting pumped into the streaming services and the projects that are going there. And we've already talked about the future of the cinema experience. My question to you now is, what do you think the future of the streaming services will be? Now that there's so many of them, like, I guess I'll get the ball rolling. I think it's ironic that a couple of years ago, everyone was complaining, especially in America, how there was like so many cable networks and like you had to pay for all these different channels and stuff. And then streaming services came around. It's like, oh, that's going to kill cable TV. And that basically did, right? But now there's so many streaming services. There's Netflix, Disney, Hulu, HBO.
I think I know where you're going with this.
There's so many of them. Yeah. Right? It's almost made it obsolete. Like, and now if you want to pay for like the 5 or 6 streaming services that you want, it's going to cost you almost the same amount of money that it would be to have a cable network. Like, I guess the Australian example would be Foxtel, right?
Yeah.
Like, in order to pay for Foxtel, it's like, it's way too much money, right? But if you were going to pay for Foxtel versus having 6 or 7 streaming services, it might even still be like the same amount of money. So it's an interesting conversation of like, yes, I understand there's so much great content being made out there, but what is the future of the streaming services when there's so many of them now?
Well, I thought you were going to be going to the point where it was announced the other day about Sony.
Oh, well, yes. Okay, yeah.
yeah,
Also, you want to expand and explain that?
Yeah. So what happened was essentially that Sony came to Netflix and said that like we're going to be making a deal. We want to make a deal with you where that after the movie has been released, we will pay for every single one going forward to put our entire catalog onto your streaming service. And for movies like, say, Morbius or Ghostbusters, about, I don't know...
The Spider-Man and Venom sequels.
all those ones. I believe going forward, I believe 7 months after I think it has had its cinema release, that they will actually be put onto Netflix. I believe it's exclusively. And so essentially, what Sony did was, instead of saying, look, we are going to be, we want to compete, we want to be in the streaming wars, we're going to make our own streaming service. And they have, a couple of their own sort of like back-end sort of streaming services like Crunchyroll and Crackle that don't really sort of like, it's not a draw for anybody and it's just like free-to-air stuff. What they're essentially doing is, no, we're going to be going to the big leagues. We're going to be going to the one who's currently...
Top dog.
The top dog, and saying, we will make a deal with you to put that stuff onto your streaming service, for you to buy the rights, from us, and we will get a piece of it. And so I think that's I think the future in terms of business talk for streaming, I think that's what is going to be more seeing those big studios like Universal already has its streaming service with Peacock. Other streaming services, other big studios are going to be going to the ones like Amazon Prime, and all those big ones, and they're going to be going, okay, and we kind of already have seen it. We've seen a couple of, we've been seeing it with individual movies, like Trials Chicago 7 came to Netflix, and essentially saved that movie. But I think going forward, they will be cutting deals with studios to put their movies onto their streaming services, where it's going to be exclusively streamed to their entire catalog. And I think that's what's going to be happening. But it's not going to. But what's great about that is they're not going to not shun, but cut out the going to the cinema, because you will still have that opportunity. I honestly think that's the smart play.
Well, I think it's a good point, because I think it's also a good move on their end, because it's like, instead of adding an extra streaming service that you have to pay for, they're just going to be making their money now through Netflix.
Yeah. And
I think it's probably going to be more, I mentioned this to you the other day, I think it's going to be more profitable for them long term.
Oh God, yes. I think so as well. And I think if we look at the future in about 5 years, I think the landscape, I don't think it will go back to the way it used to be pre-COVID. I think it will be different. And I don't mean just sort of like in terms of like what it is now, but essentially evolved. I think that is going to, there are going to be different models that they're going to be following, and different priorities. And I certainly think that we are sort of living through a shift in terms of the cinema industry. At first, I thought to myself, and especially in response to what Warner Brothers was going to be doing, I essentially thought that cinema was essentially going to become vinyl, in that it's not going to go away, but it's going to become more of a niche market.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, that's what I thought it was, but I think once again, going back to Godzilla vs. Kong doing so well, I do think that they are re-examining the landscape and thinking going to be a bit more selective about what they're going to be willing to put out there. And I also think another point, because I think a couple of cinemas do this, where if it's a movie from Disney, the prices are actually for those movies. It costs more to purchase a ticket for those movies than another studio, which me personally, I don't particularly like, but
it is what it is.
It is what it is, yeah. But you've got to look at also the price for a ticket. I know a lot of people were criticizing Milan about paying $30 to go see to pay the $30 fee upon the subscription to Disney Plus. I kind of understand it in that, like, look at what Milan is marketed towards. It's the audience that it's wanting to get, which is essentially a family, a family audience, and what is that? That's a parent, a parent or two with a child. So that's probably about 3 people. How much would that be at the cinema? That's probably going to be more
$30.
Yeah, it's going to be about $30, and also you have the ability to pause it. You have the go to the bathroom, not miss out on anything. You can stop inside at any time you want, and it's in your room. I understand why it's a $30 fee, and
So do I.
Yeah, I understand that. But also, if Black Widow is going to be doing that, then it's very interesting that they would allow for that. I didn't see Ryan the Last Dragon on Disney Plus. I saw it at the cinema, and it cost me about $9. So I think maybe that's what's going to drive people to go back to the cinema. It's just sort of like we could watch this once, pay the $30 fee, watch this once on Disney Plus. Don't watch it again. We don't even know what the movie's like. Or we could pay a lower price at the cinema, watch it once, and go like, yeah, it's not for us, or no, I actually like this, and then go and pay it on Disney Plus.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head with regards to that's why it hits that $30 price mark.
Yeah.
Because the idea behind it is that you're not just paying for one person, you're paying for numerous people. Because once you buy that film, it's available across all the accounts, right?
Yeah.
So I understand that obviously, a price of a box office ticket admission would be, around $10 to $15. That eventually will equal up if you're going with multiple people to maybe around $30, depending on obviously how many people you're going with.
Yeah.
So I understand it, and I think you hit all the right points. But it'll be interesting to see how the distribution strategies change moving forward.
Yeah.
Whether it'll be cinema and streaming service at the same time, or whether it'll be cinema only, or cinema and streaming service with the additional fee, or just streaming services straight up. So it's definitely studios have now got a plethora of options. My personal opinion on it, and what I hope, I don't think it'll be the case, but I hope that movies get a cinema window where they're in cinemas for a certain amount of time, and then they go to streaming services straight away after that.
Yeah, well, I've also got to beg the question about physical media.
Like Blu-rays and stuff?
Yeah, I mean...
Well, I collect Blu-rays and stuff, so I would appreciate that as well, because I understand financially there's a whole different strategy with regards to you have your box office window, then you have your DVD, Blu-ray, physical media window, and then you have your streaming window, and then you also have TV broadcast windows as well. So movies make money in lots of different ways. So I think that's also a big dilemma that these studios are having, is how they're going to make the most amount of money from these different windows, especially when streaming is now the forefront.
Yeah, but I also got to think, this baffles me, and I could be wrong on this, but I remember when there was something about Disney saying going forward they're not going to be invested in doing with physical media or something like that. Then why are they putting out so many 4K titles? Milan is available in 4K.
I think it's just for those people that are in that market. I think, you mentioned about the vinyl and stuff, I think it's just for those people that are within that very niche market. Yeah. So I think it's good that they still cater to them, but I think we could both agree that they probably won't invest as much money in that area in order to pump out as many Blu-rays and 4K copies. Yeah,
I guess so, yeah. But it just was very interesting to see that, going to JB Hi-Fi, they've got the entire, Pixar collection in 4K in this big box on sale, even though they have said, no, our sole focus is going, to streaming and, putting, stuff out there. And yet they're still putting out, physical, media, and just sort of okay, it just makes me question, where your priorities are at. And yeah,
well, at the end of the day, they're just trying to make as much money as possible.
Yeah,
right?
They're trying to squeeze out, just a little bit more. Yeah, so I still, buy, physical media as well. I think that it just looks, looks so much better, especially in 4K.
I really love that satisfying. As soon as you put the disc in, it just sucks it in, and then you get to play. And plus, also the good thing about that is you get all those behind the scenes and gag reels and all the extra stuff that is also fun to watch as well.
Yeah, which I think Disney Plus does that really well because they have those extra, bonus stuff on there, which I think is definitely a draw.
I'm glad, yeah.
Yeah. So, I really, appreciate that. And also, I mean, going forward, I think within the past, I don't know, 10 months, I think I finally switched over to 4K, and I'm not going back. But I think going forward, I do think that 4K, especially on streaming services, I think need to improve on that with the content that they, well, not the content that they create, but when they get like, I don't know, I know that Blade Runner 2049 is in 4K on Netflix, but that's because like Sony is so invested in like the 4K medium, but then you have other studios that don't, have that. And if you go in, I think the best streaming service in terms of like putting out 4K content is Stan. If you go on there, they have like the Bourne, franchise in 4K.
The James Bond ones, right?
Yeah, all the James Bond films are in 4K. The Jurassic films are in 4K. Stan is fantastic with that stuff. And there are films that like aren't even in 4K on physical media, like Steve Jobs. Well, I love that movie, and that's in 4K now on Stan. That's I can't even find that anywhere else, like even to purchase online. It's just sort of like invest more in that. Like I would like to see more of that because I just fell in love with 4K, especially recently. But going forward, I do think that there is certainly going to be. I think there's going to have to be a reinvestment in cinema because it's certainly taken a dip. We are essentially living in a depression right now in terms of cinema. It's certainly going to be a reevaluation, but it's also, I think, going to be a reinvestment. I'm cautiously optimistic.
So am I.
Yeah, I'm cautiously optimistic. But I do think that streaming does have its place, and I do think that streaming opens up certain avenues in terms of things that you can't really do at the cinema, I think. There was that Black Mirror Bandersnatch thing.
Great example.
Which I think does kind of fall under the gimmick because it's just sort of like, I would classify a gimmick as sort of like something that you check out, you fiddle around with it, and then you don't really come back to it. Bandersnatch kind of fell under that. It's just sort of like, okay, yeah, this is cool.
I love Bandersnatch. It was so much fun.
Yeah, it was fun, and trying to figure out just like all the different alternatives and all that, and you kind of loop back around to things. Yeah, it was cool, but just sort of like for me, and you kind of need to look at the audience to go like, okay, how long are they spending on this and stuff like that. But are they going to have that, test that out in different shows? I believe it didn't Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt actually do that as well?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not too sure either. I think they were going to be doing that. Sort of like pick the different punchline to the joke or something like that, which is kind of cool. But I do think that streaming will be able to actually open up avenues for different types of storytelling that cinema won't.
I'm on the exact same page as you.
Yeah.
And the whole foundation of this conversation today has been about the cinema experience. And I'm going to ask you now, what do you think are some of the pros and cons of going to a cinema nowadays? Obviously, there's a few obvious ones. Obviously, one of the pros would be, watching a movie on the big screen. Some of the cons may be like, there's annoying people in the back seat sort of thing. But I'm interested to hear from you. What do you think are some of the pros and cons of the cinema going experience as of today?
Okay, well, I'll start off with the cons first. I just think that people... I think there's a lack of etiquette that is being drawn attention to. I think that for me, if somebody is still on their phone or is still talking as soon as the movie studio logo comes on, I'm already having a fit. And I think that a lot of people are confusing the etiquette of, well, it's not even etiquette at home. Like people are treating going to the cinema almost like watching a movie at home. Yes,
I agree.
I think there's some overlaps. Yeah, I hate it as well because there is some decor. There is some, as I said, etiquette that you abide by. There is a social contract, an unwritten. Well, I'm not sure if it's unwritten, but there is a social contract that is essentially created when you go to the cinema. In the same way, there is things that you do and don't do when going out in public. You are in public. You are among the people. You are, like, it's a communal experience. You're not at home. So when you go to the cinema, just because it goes down and everything is black does not mean you are cut off from the people who are next to you. I think that there needs to be a bit more of an emphasis on theater etiquette going forward. What else? I think there is certainly some upkeep in terms of how cinemas are kept clean and all that.
I 100% agree. I give lots of criticism to certain theaters because they don't do that. They have sticky seats or sticky floors, or the seats are not comfortable at all. I'm on the same page. I think there needs to be a better upkeep with the facilities.
Yeah, and I mean, you could argue also just sort of like they only have a certain amount of time between sort of...
Don't care.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, there's only a certain amount of time between like when the last movie ends and then the next movie, begins with people walking in and all that.
It's not a complicated job. Get cleaners in, clean in and out, and then next person comes in.
Yeah, and even if there is a problem, with that, put them through a training course or something like that. That they can attend. In order to get it cleaner and stuff like that, because it is part of their job. To clean, and may as well do an adequate job of it. So yeah, I that's definitely one of them. I think that, and something else that we haven't really touched upon is, especially for a lot of filmmakers who prefer film over digital and stuff like that, I think that, and I guess it kind of falls under, in terms of like presentation for TV as well. I really love going to, say like Gomor or going to Palace Cinema, and they're actually showing it in film. There is, and maybe it's nostalgia talk, I don't know, but I do think that there is something so fascinating about like the different presentations of a movie at the cinema.
I think it'd be nice if more theaters had that option. It's just one of those sad realities that I feel like because cinemas have been struggling a lot recently, that we don't get more of that. But I think, especially if a lot more of the mainstream theaters had that extra option, whether maybe it's just one cinema that like one of their specific cinemas that does it, I think that would still be cool. But because like I think as of right now, a lot of the mainstream ones just have their normal default big screen
digital,
experience,
yeah.
And then you have very niche specific theaters that only do stuff like that.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, I think that it has become very niche. Like here in Brisbane, where do you go? To see film projected on celluloid, at Palace Cinema, at Goma. At the very it's there. I can't think. I think the only theatre in the country, I think, that actually has that Event Cinemas actually has a film projector, I believe, is George Street in Sydney.
Wow.
Yeah, and because I think they did like that roadshows thing that Tarantino did with The Hateful Eight, shown it in, I think it was 70 mil. They actually showed it at George Street back when they were doing that roadshow thing. I think it was like the only location in Australia that actually did that. So, I mean, that's for me. I know a lot of people don't give a shit about, how a film is projected, but it is a very small thing that does make a big impact in terms of like how you present the film. Because, look, for some people, you can present a film just in any way and they'll be fine, but then you get to like say like if it's bad sound or anything like that, people get up in arms, and if it sounds drowned out or anything like that. Yeah, so definitely.
Well, I'll jump in here. I think the movie-going experience needs to be of the highest quality, because I agree. When you go to a theater and you have an uncomfortable seat, or the screen has like a mark on it, or there's a bit of grime on stuff on the screen, or there's a speaker that's not working properly, it all takes you out of the movie going experience. And one of the most important things of when you're watching a movie or a TV show or any type of screen story is that once you're watching it, and if the story is good, you get immersed within it, you get immersed within the world, you are enjoying the characters because you're going on the journey with them. And it's almost like a magical spell. You almost get hypnotized in a way. You kind of get sucked into it. And when you are in a theater and someone kicks the back of your seat, or they're on their phone and that light comes up and it just snaps you out of it, even if it's like a very brief moment.
Yeah.
Those little moments can really detract from that movie going experience. So I agree. I think the etiquette needs to definitely improve from a lot of people, because I have noticed that when I went and saw Wonder Woman 1984, there was a woman on her phone for basically like 75% of that movie. And even worse, she was having her camera open. She was recording parts of the movie. And I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? I'm like, why? You're just distracting me, because she was right in front of me, right? And
also, you're committing a crime. Like,
well, exactly right. Again, I don't know what the purposes of that recording was, but regardless, you shouldn't be doing that anyway.
Yeah.
So that was annoying. And I agree. I think etiquette from the people within that experience, like you said, I think it's an unspoken rule, but just come on, people. I think it's fair enough, because when you're in that movie going experience, you just want to get immersed in the story and kind of enjoy it for what it is. You don't want to be thinking about the people behind you, or like being in a seat that's uncomfortable, all that type of stuff. And I also agree that there are certain things when you're watching a movie that you need to be like, we're watching a movie right now. We're not at home having a conversation.
Yeah.
Because I've had many times when, we're watching a movie on the big screen and then there'll be someone behind me giving a commentary or having a chat with their friends. I'm like, come on, man. I'm just trying to watch this movie.
It depends on the type of movie. I remember going to see The Meg, which is not a good movie, but I had the best time watching it with my friends and just... It wasn't heckling the movie, but it was just sort of like, yes, they're about to do that stupid thing, and I love it.
Okay, let me make a key distinction then, because I agree, because there's nothing wrong with reacting to a movie and having a natural, loud emotion towards it, whether it be laughter or cringe or horror or whatever it is, and making sometimes those satirical heckling type moments. That's all fine. It's just when it's irrelevant or not related to the movie going experience. So like, for example, when I went and saw Jurassic World, there was a bunch of high schoolers behind me, and they're just talking about like high school shit during the movie, and I'm like, come on, dudes! I'm just like, I'm trying to watch this movie, and you're distracting me. I didn't enjoy that Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, but that's a whole different story.
Have you ever gone to the cinema to see The Room?
I haven't. Well, I watched it just down at Griffith in the QC on the big screen there. That was the very first time I watched it.
Go to, I think they're doing it at New Farm, on a Friday of the 9th, I think it is, every single month. Go do that. I've been twice. It is so much fun.
I can imagine, because that is a bloody strange movie.
Yeah, it
has earned the title of the best worst movie ever made.
But I'm saying that simply because that is a different etiquette altogether. Because because in regards to that, everybody knows what you can and can't do during that. You can throw spoons at it. You can provide commentary. You can get up, climb all over the season. Stuff like that. We all know that is an agreed upon thing during that movie because it's a cult film.
Of course.
But in case of that movie over there, Avengers End Game, during that big third act, I'm just going to say the word portals.
Yes.
In case you have not seen the second highest grossing movie of all time, I wanted to just stand up out of my seat and just cheer and give everyone a high five.
100%.
Yes, because of 100%. Yeah. But any other movie that's like that, I appreciate that they have that enthusiasm.
Well, it's funny you mention that, and I think that's a very key point. And I want to make sure that I'm making myself quite clear, is that I don't expect people to come into a movie and just be silent the whole time and not react. There are certain movies that elicit that key emotion out of you. Avengers End Game is a great example of that because, this is a whole separate debate that we won't get into just now, but Martin Scorsese liked to compare the Marvel movies to theme parks and stuff.
Yeah.
And a lot of people took offense to that, but I think he's dead right. I think the Marvel
enjoy
movies,
theme park rides.
Exactly. I think the Marvel movies do such a great job of getting a collective community to get together and eliciting a response from them, because Avengers Endgame and even Infinity War with the moment with Thor, those moments in Endgame, the portals moment, and when Captain America lists Mjolnir, there are those key moments that make the fans go absolutely wild inside the theater, and you get those crazy responses where people are screaming, just that raw excitement and emotion, and those type of reactions are awesome. I know when I saw Avengers End Game at the very premiere experience, I was the exact same. I had tears of joy, tears of sadness, and I was fist pumping in the air.
Yeah.
So it's stuff like that. I agree. When a movie elicits a key emotion out of you that's earned, 100% worth it. It's just in all those moments that are not relevant to the movie that I take issue with.
I know also that's an external reaction. I think there are a lot of movies that give you an internal reaction that gets you into a state of mind. An example of this that I always go to is a movie that I'm not even big on. I'm actually not the biggest fan of this movie. I remember, and it was actually a movie that I saw twice at the cinema, and I actually got more of a reaction out of it the second time I saw it, simply because I was in a state of mind at the time. The Revenant. The first time I saw it, I was just sort of like, not for me. I don't understand why I didn't. But I remember seeing it the second time. I think it was like a day or two after won all its Oscars, and I was in a dump emotionally. And then I decided, you know what, I'm going to go see The Revenant again. It was like 8:30 at night. It was raining. It was cold. And then when I saw that movie, I described it as sort of being akin to like slipping into a warm bath. And I was almost paralyzed with sort of like, if a movie can make me feel what it's trying to, like what it's showing.
What it's simulating.
Yeah, what's simulating, then I know it's done a good job as that. Even though, once again, I actually think that the movie is a snooze fest. I think it's repetitive in places, but I think the one thing that movie does a really good job at is, like you said, simulating what it's showing on the screen. And I think I always say this: if a movie can make you feel if you can taste something. One of a great film maker of this is Luca Guadagnino, who directed Call Me by Your Name and Suspiria and A Bigger Splash. Call Me by Your Name is so great because its majority of it is set in like summer Italy, and you can feel the heat of Italy. And then when it cuts to like winter, you can feel the coldness of that season. It's a very seasonal movie, and when they're sitting at the table and they're drinking juice and they're eating stuff like that, you can just you can taste the flavors of all the things that they're eating and all that. I think if a movie can appeal to all the senses that we have, then I think that movie has done a fantastic job. Even if, say, you're not invested in the story or ones you certainly don't enjoy, you can still admire it because it has given you that reaction that's not negative, that makes you just want to punch a hole through the screen. So yeah, when a movie does that, that's when I know, just sort of like, yeah, they've done a pretty good job with that.
Well, I think we're mixing different things here, but like with both positives and like the pros and cons. Some of the pros, like what's a specific what's a specific pro that you would give to the cinema going experience, even though we already have touched on a few?
I mean, it's
like, what's that one key pro for the cinema experience that you're like, when I go to the theater, I always expect this, and if I get it, I'm super satisfied?
I mean, just show me something I haven't seen before, or something that just sort of like is very much akin to sort of like, give me something that I didn't know I needed. This wasn't at the cinema, but I imagine if I did see it at the cinema, I would have just been just like, this is my jam. I've recently watched The French Connection, and I thought to myself, like, if I saw this at the cinema, my mind would be blown, because this, once again, going back to like a sensation, I know what winter in New York feels like. I have been to New York twice, and I felt like I was back there in New York with them, just like standing outside in the cold, just waiting, with a coat, and just stuff like that. But also the chase scenes, and knowing afterwards they didn't really have permits for some of the chase scenes in that movie. And it's just like, and I was thinking to myself, how did they do this? When a movie makes me think to myself, how did they achieve this? I just go like, yeah, that's pretty special to me. Like, me knowing like, how did they achieve that shot? It's just like, that's the stuff that I really go sort of like, pretty bonkers over.
Yeah, I had that recurring question many times throughout watching 1917 on the big screen.
I'm actually
such a masterpiece for the theater going experience.
Oh, you don't want to hear my opinion on 1917?
Well, I know, you're not too keen on it, but anyway, one of my big pros for the cinema experience is obviously you mentioned it, the story and being able to give you that emotion of like, I've not seen this before. This is profound. But to me, another big thing that I really love about the theater going experience is obviously the big screen, but also the sound system.
Yeah.
When you're in a good theater that has a great sound system, and you just kind of get immersed within the world that it's showcasing, and even little things like when the movie logos at the start come up. Some studios are really creative with the way they kind of set the tone for the movie that you're about to watch through the credits at the beginning. One of the best example, I would say the best example of this is Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
Okay.
Where the opening logos and stuff that they set up, it's so graphic and it's so disorientating the way it shows the logos, because it's like going between the different filters of like the comic booky feel versus like the live action feel. Like you've seen it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that opening sequence, right, with the logos, it's very disorientating. The music is obviously really loud, and it does that in order to kind of like get your brain in the right mindset for it to be like you're watching a very specific type of animation that really helps you kind of get ready for it, because that movie animation wise is brilliant. It's one of the best animated movies ever made, I think. But I think that opening sequence with those intros really sets the stage for the movie you're about to watch. And again, that's obviously, of course, thanks to the animation, but also the sound design. And I remember watching that on the big screen for the first time and just being like, wow, this is awesome. Just like getting into that feeling. And then when they have that thumping noise of, approved by the Comics Association, just so cool.
Yeah.
And stuff like that I think is really awesome when you can make use of the cinema mixing and that cinema feel, and just have these sounds going all the way, especially like when helicopters fly over you, or something's happening behind you in a horror movie that gives you that extra fear. Just stuff like that is just amazing.
You often think it's just sort of like, oh, there's actually somebody like who's actually there. It's just sort of like, oh, there's something going up there. No, it's actually part of the sound system. But I'm not sure if I should say I'm going to slightly push back on this. First time I saw Into the Spider-Verse, and it's interesting that you actually mentioned just that, the logo and stuff like that. That was actually the point where I was just sort of like, okay, what am I in for? Because admittedly at the time, I was exhausted with work. It was like 8:30 at night, but I actually thought to myself like, this is kind of an assault on the senses.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's just sort of like...
Well, I think it's deliberately so,
No.
Yeah.
It's deliberately. I agree with that. But for me, it was just sort of like, this is really loud. And there comes a point where it's just sort of like, yes, it's loud, but don't make my eardrums burst, And that's like one of those movies where I was just sort of like, this is really loud. Can someone turn this down? The last time that happened to me, I think it was Tenet. And funnily enough, I saw it on film. The first time I saw it, I was just sort of like, this is really loud. And I'm not just talking about like, like the dialogue's muffled and stuff like that, which it is.
Yes.
But it's just sort of like, can they turn it down a notch a bit? Because it's just sort of like, when it becomes an irritant, that's when I just go like... it's just like when it's pushing back against me. And also like the problem I had with Into the Spider-Verse the first time I saw it was same problem that I kind of have with the Lego movies is just sort of like it is so frenetic in pace and style. It's just sort of like my retinas are going to burn. It's just sort of like there's just so much going on and not being able to keep up with it and all that. That's sort of like me personally, I don't always gravitate towards animation when it's done right. Once again, going back, if it's able to make me feel. Inside Out, I cry every single time when I watch that movie. And I love that movie, but then you get some other movies where it's just sort of like, it's, fine. And I'm talking specifically with animation. So Into the Spider-Verse was one of those ones where it just sort of like, I think it took me like another viewing for me I watched it, the second time at home, and it was just like, okay, I get it. Right.
It's funny you mention that, and this is again why I love movies, is because art is subjective and everyone interprets things differently. What I really loved about that movie, that frenetic style, you dislike. And I think that's what's so good about art in that way is that how it affects people differently.
Yeah.
And obviously it's great when there's a consensus one way or the other, when everyone loves something, or sometimes when everyone hates something, that can kind of be fun as well. But I think that's what makes the movie-going experience so entertaining, is because everyone's coming together to have this collective experience with a community, and because we want to enjoy a story as a collective. And I think that's one of the best things that the cinema going experience really does, is it provides that sense of community. And when you're telling a really great story that has great characters that can really draw you in, and whether it's an educational movie that kind of says something about a specific topic or something, or whether it's a movie that shares something social or political or sometimes cultural, are movies that try and share or try and change something within society, that try and make a movement. Stuff like that is sometimes interesting. But at the end of the day, I think movies are always trying to provide a sense of escapism for people. And I think the entertainment factor is obviously a key factor. But at the end of the day, as long as the movie is of high quality from a technical perspective, and then it has great characters and a good story, I think then that's a great recipe for success.
I just thought of this. Do you ever get that sensation while you're watching a movie that, yes, it is a community experience, but you feel this sense of togetherness?
Yes.
Do you you feel just sort of because there are times where just you feel like an individual at the cinema and stuff like that, but when you feel when people are laughing or something like that, or you just feel like you're all in you're all in this, and I think that's, I guess you could have that, at home when you you have friends or family over to watch, movie and all that. I remember when I invited all my friends to come over and watch the new Borat movie, and it was just sort of I don't think I would have enjoyed that much if I just watched it by myself. But to watch it with strangers, this is the thing that the only thing that we have, when you go to the cinema, the only thing that we have in common is that we're about to watch the same thing, and we're facing the same way. That's literally the only thing that we have in common that we know of. But but what we're going to be doing is bonding over the enjoyment or it depends how you react to the movie. It's almost a test on just sort of are we going to band together and we're just going to be enraptured, in this movie? And MCU movies, they do that. They certainly do that.
I was to say I've had plenty of those experiences of interacting with a crowd, all collectively watching the same thing, and we all respond the same way, whether it's laughter or sadness or whatnot. And I think the best movies elicit those emotions out of you. And, sometimes, I think most movies, have a little flaw here or there. But at the end of the day, if you can leave the theater saying, I had a bloody good time, money well spent, that's what you want.
Yeah. But also outside of the cinema as well. I remember, I think the prime example of this is just remember the lead up to The Force Awakens. Just remember that.
One of the best hype experiences. Yeah. Even Avengers End Game. I think those two especially.
But can I ask you something? Do you think that the hype is bigger than the movie itself?
In what way do you mean?
Means by that, there is so much build up to a movie that it's almost overshadows sort of the reaction to the movie, just sort of the hype. When people say it lives up to the hype, I always think to myself, I try not to hype up too much, because it's just sort of shouldn't I be more excited about something after I've seen it? Because
it depends.
Yeah.
It's very specific to the type of movie and maybe the franchise, because I would agree with you that the build up to The Force Awakens was one of the most explosive pop culture moments, because it was the first time we were getting a Star Wars movie since Revenge of the Sith.
10 years,
Star Wars was dead after Revenge of the Sith. Yes, we had Clone Wars and stuff like that, but we weren't going to get any more Star Wars from George Lucas. So when Disney came through to Star Wars is a whole separate issue, because everyone has different opinions about Star Wars since Disney took over, which is a whole separate conversation. But I think we can all agree the build up to The Force Awakens was something special.
Yeah.
And Avengers End Game, you mentioned, lives up to the hype. I think that was a movie that was so hyped, but somehow they over-delivered even still.
Yeah, exactly. And I try not to sort of look at it, when I go into a movie, I just try to wipe my expectations, on a clean slate, and just judge it on regardless, of my expectations. And sometimes I fall into that trap, like my emotions dictate that. But I think that I try to have the mindset of just sort of like going in, well, not clean, but have my emotions clean of sort of like with my expectations. And then like I walk away going like, am I going to recommend this to people? Am I going to, revisit this? Is this going to, am I going to be jazzed, about this? There are some movies that I, just come out going like, I would walk, like if they have another showing of this, I'll walk back into it. An example of this was Mad Max Fury Road. I just walked out of it going like, look, if I was able to walk into another showing of this right now, I would go into it, because to me, that's a sign of like this movie existing as opposed to the made up movie that I have in my mind. I would rather something that exists that I can enjoy, as opposed to just sort of like, think about what could have been. And so with the hype, I think a majority of that hype is stimulated by people creating a movie inside their mind and setting up a whole list of boxes that are that are either ticked or left unchecked when going to the cinema. And I think Avengers End Game was one of those where I would say that like for majority of people, majority of those boxes were ticked. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree with that.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think when you're coming into a movie, and like I said, I think it's specific to the type of movie and the franchise, but as long as you're having realistic expectations for the product itself and you're also speculating responsibly, I think, they're the two main things coming into that movie.
That needs to be a phrase that actually it should become mainstream. Speculate responsibly. Speculate responsibly. It's just sort of like, I don't care about your theory about, I don't care about your Snoke theories. I don't care how you would have rewritten season 8 of Game of Thrones differently. I don't care. Look at what we have gotten. Yes, you didn't like it, but guess what? That's what we, essentially have given. And I mean, briefly going back to Zack Snyder's Justice League, he was very fortunate to actually be able to get his vision out there. And from just like an artist's perspective, not a lot of people get that chance. And so being able to rewrite, your own history and being able to go back.
Rewrite your legacy.
Yeah, rewrite your legacy. Yeah, I think that's, that's very rare and very fortunate, for some artists, but also at the same time, just sort of like for some people, yes, you may be disappointed and you have every right to, but also I actually try, as much as I am passionate about films, I always say to myself, look, no movie ever deserved to exist. No movie needed to exist. It's very fortunate that, that we are actually, we are able to see that type of magic created, but it's entertainment. It's not essential to life. I think storytelling is, but, you have certain ways of doing that. And it just so happens that, like, my favorite form of storytelling is film. So I think that, like, I'm not too precious. This is just me, talking. I'm not too precious about, like, look, I think season 8 of Game of Thrones, I think it was a solid ending. I honestly did. I think it, it needed the way that it, needed to. Rise of Skywalker, same thing. I think that, it had a solid landing. Would I have done things differently? Sure, but I'm not the filmmaker. So I guess I'm just talking about, like, in terms of like fans and, people, having about those, expectations. I think we need to be trained a bit more in terms of like not setting yourself up for disappointment, not overblowing it, because think of all the amount of times, like, think of the ratio to, like, compare where it lived up to the hype and when it didn't. I think it might tip in, the disappointing category because
of your expectations.
Yeah, of your expectations, because you just psych yourself up over what, a talking carpet, walking carpet, people, playing, dress up. That's what you're psyching yourself up over. It's make believe, and so I'm not too precious about it, but I do get passionate, about it because it is something that I am interested in. But you also got to take a step back every so often and go like, Yeah, what we're excited for, space wizards and laser swords, it's ridiculous. It is ridiculous, but I love ridiculous.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the most important parts is, when we all go into an experience on the same page, expecting something and sometimes getting something different, but as long as we go in with the right mindset, I think that's what's most important. And
yeah,
I think I agree with a lot of what you said, and I think this has actually been a really productive conversation, and I really am thankful for you coming in and sharing your thoughts. Final thoughts from you on this topic of what is the purpose of cinema? Do you have any final thoughts?
I kind of spewed it all out to you, man. But I'm still waiting for the day. I guess we kind of already had it with Godzilla vs Kong, but I'm very looking forward to seeing. I also, in terms of cinema, I think that, and in terms of hype, actually, I was wanting to make this point. My most anticipated film for this year, funnily enough, is actually No Time to Die. That movie, the reason why seeing that movie is important to me, and this is just individually to me, the last time there was a Bond movie, I was just about to graduate from high school. A couple of years later, next Bond movie is about to come out. I'm just about to graduate from university. And I'm a big fan of the Bond franchise, but between the time that there was a Bond movie to now, I have become an entirely different person. And it just feels like, and also I've grown up with Daniel Craig as my Bond. I remember seeing Casino Royale when I think I was 8 or 9 at the cinema. I actually got to see it at the cinema, and so he has been Bond for majority of my life in the same way that Hugh Jackman was Wolverine for the majority of people's lives, and then people, crying about Logan. The idea that I'm going to sit down and see Daniel Craig for the last time as James Bond is just I'm not sure how I'm going to handle myself emotionally. A friend of mine told me that he was crying for the last 30 minutes of The Rise of Skywalker, not because it was bad, but because the idea settled in saying that this is the last time I'm going to see these characters. This is the last installment in the Skywalker saga. And so I think that that's what I think it means to a lot of people. It's not just sort of what goes on in terms of what goes on inside the movies, but also outside as well. I think that when you draw those patterns, it's just sort of holy shit, I've been through so much since that last movie came out and stuff like that. Now I get to see it with, a different perspective. I get to react to all these things, differently now, interpret it. And so I think that it all comes down to if what's important, especially just with movies in general, it's be your own individual in how you react to it. I think that just weigh up what your interests and tastes are and just have those in check, and whether it ticks off all the boxes, or not, it all depends up to you. And once again, I'm going to be going into No Time to Die with, I try to, have tempered expectations, but I know that I'm just going to be, I'm not sure how I'm going to handle myself emotionally, just knowing that I'm going to sit down and, watching it, for the first time and knowing, holy shit, this is the last time I'm going to see Daniel Craig as James Bond. Don't underestimate your emotion towards certain things, I think. But not because of how precious you are about the characters, but just, how they have, played a role, how they have been there for you your entire life, or, and just things like that. And I think that's pretty, important, and I think it, makes us, build character and just think of the world, a bit more wholly. I'm not sure if that's the right word, but you understand what I'm saying. I think I'm going to be going down on a tangent on this, but yeah.
No. I think what you've just said to kind of wrap up this podcast is very powerful. And I'm on the same page, and I agree. The movie-going experience is something special.
Yeah.
And it's why I love movies, and, why so many people around the world, celebrate this type of stuff, is because it can affect you emotionally in very profound ways.
Give me goosebumps again.
My final thoughts on this conversation are that there have been very key moments within the cinema industry over the last century. And I think there you can kind of pinpoint those moments in history. A lot of them are recent. I think Jaws, I have that poster up deliberately, 1975, correct?
I believe so, yeah.
That movie came out and it revolutionized the way the cinema experience was because of the amount of box office it had.
Yeah.
1977, Star Wars came out.
Yes.
Completely changed the landscape with the way filmmaking was done, both technically and the way it was consumed, especially within pop culture. Pop culture has changed because of Star Wars. I think another huge pivotal moment within the cinema landscape was when Avatar came out in 2010.
Yes, I was thinking that, yeah.
That played a huge role in the way visual effects were conceived, but also that was the boom of the 3D experience.
I'd also say Lord of the Rings because
Lord of the Rings,
yeah,
of course.
look at the creation of Gollum by Andy Serkis. They were like
Motion capture,
yeah,
of
motion
course.
capture. Yeah, I think that certainly did that. Yeah.
Yep. And then I think the two most recent ones is, of course, 2015 when Star Wars The Force Awakens came out. That's probably one that will go down as one of the most hyped cinema-going experiences and one of the best moments in pop culture because regardless of what you think of The Force Awakens, that moment of the Star Wars fandom going into that movie to see the Star Wars fanfare again, there'll never be a feeling like it. And, of course, the most recent example, arguably the best, I would say the best, me personally, because I'm biased, Avengers End Game.
I was wondering why I had that poster up there.
Again, that poster's up there as well. It is my favorite movie-going experience, and I have never experienced anything like it where I've been satisfied so wholly because I got exactly what I wanted, but I also got things I never knew I wanted.
Yeah.
And just the experience was something I'll never forget, and it is the most profound movie-going experience I've ever had. And again, that's just great down to filmmakers who are doing the best job that they can in order to create a product for fans to enjoy.
It's their jobs after all.
Exactly. And I think, there's a lot of pros and cons with the film industry, but at the end of the day, we as fans go to the cinema to have that experience of watching something that's really entertaining. And I think there's lots of great examples out there. There's also lots of examples of shit out there, but that's okay. That's all part of the experience. And I think, that's what's most fun about going to the cinema.
Even the shit ones, I think, have their place in the same way that, the
best ones do.
Best ones do. It's just sort of like what not to do. So, no, I definitely agree with that. But, yeah, it all comes down, for me, it just all comes down to taste and just sort of like, it's like being in touch with just like knowing what you enjoy. What are you looking for? And just sort of like, when you just suspect you're watching something like, this is my jam, I think that like that's the moment where I'm just sort of like, yeah, this is my, this is all mine. These emotions, what I'm experiencing right now, it's all me. It's what I'm experiencing. This is my, and it's all comes down to, it's you. Every single person has a unique experience, even if it's a bit similar to other people. It's your own experience. That's what makes it unique to you. So I think that like something like Avengers End Game is definitely, there's no other feeling like it.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I definitely agree with that.
Michael, thank you very much for coming on. Fist bump.
Thank
I really
you.
appreciate it. This has been an awesome conversation. I loved every second of it, and I think you've added a lot of interesting little tidbits, and I think, the conversation's been very productive. So thank you very, very much for coming on to the podcast. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Caleb. It's great.
That's all for today's episode. Thank you very much for watching wherever you are around the world, whether you're watching this on YouTube or listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. If you could share the podcast around, that's the way we grow. And I would really appreciate if you did hit that like button if you are on YouTube. And of course, make sure you are subscribed and following the podcast links wherever you are listening or watching around the world. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in another time.